Bonsoir à tous. Goedenavond allemaal en welkom op deze eerste lezing van het jaar. A+ en Beaux-Arts hebben het genoegen je Tham en Martin Videgård uit Zweden voor te stellen. Als ook Umberto Napolitano van het Franse bureau LAN. We zijn blij om jullie allen te mogen verwelkomen voor deze dubbellezing over hout, die plaatsvindt dankzij de steun van Hout Infobois. De twee uitgenodigde bureaus hanteren het materiaal hout op twee zeer verschillende manieren. Pour débuter la soirée, Umberto Napolitano nous expliquera entre autres ce qui a poussé LAN à mettre en place une structure en bois pour leur projet Wood Up, qui est une tour d'habitation en construction en plein cœur de Paris, ville dans laquelle est basé LAN, le bureau d'architecture qu'il a fondé avec Benoît Jalon en 2002. Et ensuite, Tham Videgård, dont le bureau est en place depuis 1999 à Stockholm, nous présenteront leur pratique architecturale à travers l'utilisation du bois, qui est plus que récurrente dans leur projet. Na de lezingen gaan de twee bureaus dieper in op de impact die het gebruik van hout kan hebben op architectuur. Het gesprek wordt gemodereerd door Lisa de Visser, artistiek directeur van A+. Avant de donner la parole aux différents intervenants, nous tenons à remercier le sponsor principal de cette conférence, Hout Infobois, les sponsors EcoBuild Brussels, FSC, PEFC, ainsi que les partenaires de cet événement, Swedish Institute, Architects Sweden, Swedish Wood et l'ambassade de Suède, ainsi que la Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles, de Vlaamse Overheid, het Brusselse Stedelijk Gewest en de Stad Brussel. Ten slotte bedank ik graag Beaux-Arts voor de coproductie van dit evenement. Umberto Napolitano.
Thank you for this invitation. The light is very strong. If by any chance we can just... Anyway, when you accept an invitation... I can really not see you. It's very funny because when you accept an invitation for a lecture, normally you know that like 5 months before, then you forget. And then like 3 days before the lecture, you kind of see what is going on in that place, what they ask for, and tonight it was for speaking of wood construction. And I said to myself like 3 days ago, what I will say. I mean, I've done only one building, probably 2 in wood, and it's a year that I'm saying that it's not very intelligent to use it in Paris. So I will share that with you tonight, and I will introduce you to the different topics and meanings that we are working around this idea of materials. Let me just introduce the office. LAN means Local Architecture Network. We started the office in 2002 with Benoît Jalon. We were lucky enough to build more than 100 projects in these 18 years, extremely different in terms of sites, typology, climate, condition, economy, everything generated a project. This is a diagram showing the ongoing project now, which goes from 100 meters square to more than 100,000 meters square. Few images of those projects. This work? Yes. Some housing there. As you see, they are very, very different. Office, and then a public building, a theater. The Grand Palais, which is the biggest French museum now, and it has to be delivered for 2024, the Olympic Games. Even a sport hall, a gymnasium, and then industrial building, student housing, social housing, urban renovation, even a fire and a rescue center, a prison, which I will show you. And now we are going more and more in planification and kind of large sites, city construction. This is the project we are doing in Bruxelles, Rempart-les-Moines, with MDV architecture. It's just started, and I'm discovering the way you work here. Kind of very different from the rest of the world. And this is another project we have in Belgium, which is in Charleroi, in the northern part of the city. LAN, it's European. I mean, I am Italian, Benoit is French, and we really believe in the fact that Europe starts on next door, whatever is your project. If you start to build up a precise culture made of all this culture together, probably is a beginning. So we have like 16 different nationalities in the office. With practice, we also try to write what we think, and myself, I'm engaged in research and teaching. I'm teaching at Columbia and in New York, and now at the AEA in London. So those are a few books that we wrote. And all this research generate projects which are totally independent from the built world, like the exhibition we have curated and the book we did in Haussmann, where we challenge the idea of taking Paris as a model to understand and reread the question of density today, the question of flexibility. I mean, things that we can learn from the 19th century city. So the exhibition is going around. And we also compared what we learned with other cities to generate at the end this text in this book. So the main point of our work, let's say, that is not the materials in itself, even if we really engage with techniques and with choice related to space, but it's more like the city and the form. The city as a collective, social and political expression of a project, and the form as the tools we have to kind of take a position in this largest context. So we follow a tradition of the reading of the city that comes probably from Aldo Rossi, but many others, that understand the city as an artifact, the city as an handmade object which has its own rules. City has dimension, city has materials, city has a form, city has geometry, and as an architect, we should understand that, because whatever is the project we do, whatever is dense the context, whatever is the act of urbanization, we get confronted to a legacy, to a logic that we scientifically have to understand. And then there is another layer, which Aldo Rossi called the urban fact, which make this big jump from something that we understand to something that we have to interpret. And this layer is made of economy, politics, sociological fact that as an architect you also have to understand. So what we do in LAN is work in these two parallel forms of knowledge. One is the understanding of the discipline, understanding of the result of the legacy, and then the other one is look around us and try to understand the contemporary world. And this is translated to form. When I use the word form, I would like to mention the definition of Paul Klee, because it's not something which is an end, a result. It's not how things appear, but it's just like architecture, the beginning of an history, the beginning of a movement that happened once the form is understood and read. And that's very fun because we recognize ourselves, despite the fact that I am from Naples and Benoit is from French, in this culture that comes more from Japan. You know, when I was teaching in Columbia, I bumped into this book and I bought it, and I discovered through this study that the word form is translated in 40 different versions, with 40 different words in Japan, that just explain how form is generated. There is the form of dilatation, which is called irogari, form of expansion, the nobashi. There is a form of scattering, shirashi. I finally understand why the shirashi, the salmon shirashi that we eat in a Japanese restaurant, from where the name comes from. And then there are form of wrapping, which is the tsutsumi. By the way, the concept in itself of form is related to the movement and is related to the action and the generation of this concept. So we literally follow this logic on trying to give to every form a meaning that has to solve an equation. In this same book, you find these diagrams. You can change the word form for word architecture. And it's very clear. the form is something that has to connect very strongly with a purpose, why we do things, what we want to reach, socially and politically speaking, with idea, how do we do that, with the materials, and with the techniques, hand. And so in this diagram, we recognize totally the way we work, which is this superposition of layer of meanings that we try to solve with one synthetic act, which is the form. And that has to evolve in time and history and climate and space. To show you our method, I just want to show you the last project we end, which is a prison. So a prison until now has been, since the 18th century, the moment where we decided the prison is in the city and has a specific typology, the prison has become for the city a wall that contains another world. It's clearly the expression of a limit. Think of all the prison you know, the relationship in terms of urbanity between the in and the out, the freedom and the constraint, all the people that are outside and the people that are inside is expressed through an architectural sign, which is the limit, which is the wall. You can read off the entire history of the prison, and you will find many, many examples that shows that. And when it's not in an urban situation, the prison just can be used as an island, but it's every time you have this precise moment where it is excluded. So we had the occasion of, so the purpose, let's say, if you go back on the diagram I just showed, the purpose was, can we erase this wall and try to work with the prison as it was more integrated in the urban pattern. And we did it splitting the program in two. So what is green has become the wall, but the inhabited wall, so a kind of a urban facade that contain a more secure part. And that has been translated with the materials and techniques, which gives back this object. We just, I was saying we just opened it a month ago. No, we just closed it a month ago. And it's in Corten, so the techniques is this one. And the expression of the connection is this strong limit augmented through a windows that connect the inside of the prison with the outside. And to pass over the idea of the control, so this is the entrance, is the one for people that works there, and the one for the secured one, which is here. So still a limit, but is a limit which has its own expression, and which is, and which you can, if you make a section, there is an inside and outside, which is totally connected. And then to escape to the idea of the panopticon and the secure, we just did the interior as a very playful word, because now we have techniques that allow us to control everything digitally, and so that was the occasion to give to them a kind of very colored playground, which is also the common space where everyone's meet. And so, when I go to the project that engage us in this reflection on wood, it has been very different than the others, because since the competition, they ask for a wood tower, which is very strange. No, we never start, in a certain sense, from materials. That said a lot on what's going on in France. So they asked for a wood tower, and we had two layers of meaning. One was the urban level, and the second one was the typological one. So it's a project that faces three different approach. The first one, it's obviously the urban one, because it's the only district in Paris which has been built from scratch after the foundation of Paris. When I speak about the foundation of Paris, means after the First War. Those are the buildings that are being built between 1840 and 1910. Which means 60% of the Parisian building. If you cross this map with the street, you understand that Paris has been built in 60 years. The middle-age part is very few buildings in the center. And the entire city, despite demolition, the street, the network that has been done, was built in one figure, which is, we call that in French, immeuble de rapport, which was the figure that starts after the Hôtel Particulier, and it was a building that was supposed to be rented. So we didn't know is generic enough to don't know who is the users and pay the credit with the bank. So the 57,000 immeuble de rapport that are in Paris, still the same today. And that was the tools that Napoleon and Haussmann used to build up the modern capital, and which gives also the identity of the city. Paris is one of these amazing cities where you just have a picture of 3 windows, 1 guardrail, 1 roof, you know that you are in Paris. You don't need a church, you don't need a street, you don't need an icon. The icon is the building itself. When you go in the 13, where the construction started in the 18, under Mitterrand, with the National Library, it's the opposite. I mean, they just planify, and then like is happening now in all Europe, they call one different architect for one different plot, and that gives back this kind of hybridation that is it probably European, but is for sure not Parisian. So we try to understand the singularity of this specific district, even in terms of height. Paris is 28 meters, the limit, less or more. In the 13, you can go up to, now it's Chanouvel is doing a tower of 150 meters. So it's a specific place in the city which has one very, let's say the genius loci of the 30 was the fact that the arrondissement was built on the rail ways of the train. And so you have a kind of a very three-dimensional public experience. Like you can, if you turn around, there are bridge, passerelle, stairs. You can be in a public space which is 20 meters high. And this is the only part of Paris where that's happened. So we decided to use this story to start the project. And then to, even if you analyze what is going on, there is the ground, then there is the 20-meter layer, and then you go up to this vertical point. The second point was how do you do a vertical tower in wood? Those are different examples that are going on now. It's a very strange phenomenon, like all the cities in France, they're going for this acceleration in using wood in a vertical buildings. And the third one, obviously, was the typology in itself. We are trying since 10 years in the studio to combine the quality of the single-family house with the collective building. Can we translate that in the tower? So the answer was, and even some condition of the site, like it's very close to the river. It's in between the Grand Boulevard and the Périphérique. So it's a very delicate site. So the project is just the answer to that. It's a form that is divided in 3. There is a basement that takes in account all the public space. There is a public space at 28 meters, and then the rest is housing. And there is a kind of an envelope of exterior space to define, which gives more quality to the housing, but also become the structure, also become the loggia, etc., etc. So the translation was very quick, because when you work in wood, the wall has to be the structure, and the structure is your module. So everything, it's a consequence of the materials. So that is the expression of the building at the time of the competition. And we worked with this double high module to create a large balcony which has a large loggia 7 meters high where you can see your own facade. Like from your balcony, you can see your bedroom. The majority are duplex. And so the apartments are very simple. Everything is based on the structure module, which is 3.94. And we played with the idea of combine different typology in case you want to increase the size of your apartment or reduce it. It's just a superposition, so that generate. I discovered that in Belgium, those standards are very, it take a 1.5 scale. So in Paris, a studio is 24 when you are lucky. In Belgium, it's like 35. And so the plan is easy. So you have like studio, and then you have 1 bedroom, 2-bedroom duplex, and then 3-bedroom duplex, and then 4-bedroom duplex. And a very large exterior space that increase, it's totally connected to the living room on the same height, and then 2 stairs. So that's the facade, and I will explain you after the entire materials. But the idea is really like, in that case, it's an L-shaped 2-room plus a studio that you can combine together. And few image of one of these apartments. Everything is in wood. I mean, we also played with the idea of taking what is not used during the construction to do the furniture. I will show you at the end how do we do it. And then you have the ground floor in section. You see clearly that it connects the different level of the public space. And then, like here, it's almost commercial. And then you have this public space and also collective, which is used from the people that live in the building, but also from outside. There is an association that rent it for events or whatever, and also a school that use the roof to make art exhibition. So it's, as you see, the relationship between the context and the windows, it's totally like the old Paris and the new Paris. There are 2 stairs, there are services in common, like kitchen and other things, and then 1,000 meters square of terrace. And that is like that. So this is the image from the terrace. And the things you see here, it's a wood combined LED ceiling that is also used by the art school very close to the building to do experience with the student in lighting on the paper, because we haven't built for the moment. The materials, it's very simple, because when I arrived to competition, I explained, which is very rare, I explained to the jury that it was a nonsense to do housing in wood. It was a nonsense because you lose density. I mean, at this level, like, 55 meter high. You lose density every time the thickness of your floor is more than the concrete, the structure. So at the end, you lose space. You lose the possibility to offer housing to someone. It's really more expensive. It's really more complex. But everyone is in France convinced that through a national politics and doing those examples, you could reach the level where it becomes a knowledge shared, and so the price will go down. So this is literally a manifesto. It's there to say you can do it. And to do that, we decide to increase, let me pass the word cynically, the expression of that. So as you remember the iMac, where you see the hardware of the computer. So we decide to protect the exposed part in wood with a glass. So all the structure is covered by this, let me pass the word, this huge condom in glass to exhibit the meanings of this project, which is the possibility to have a wooden structure. Then structurally is very easy. There is 2 stairs and all the wall comes down. When we need the big windows, we increase with just 1 steel beam. And what I like in these techniques, so as you can see, the glass goes until 1 meter, and then there is 2 meters balcony. This open to be cleaned, and also that part. What I like in these things is that when this work in reflection, this is one of the most interesting part of Paris, because the boulevard is very large, so you have all the light that touch the facade, which is, Paris is the densest city in Europe, so that never happened that you feel the light without shadows. You have this strong relationship with this light, and that happened here, so that works with reflection, but even with the direct light. Then, now it's the situation. Since Notre Dame has burned, the rules are changed, so we have to get some new techniques and sprinkler in the circulation. So we had economical impact on the project through this accident, and so we had to build that part and that part, but still the windows is there and is 600 meters square, which is extremely correct. So that's the point. We start the construction in September. So the second project I will show you is our own office, where the logic of using wood was totally related to two reasons, very strong. One was we have to be light, it's a sur-elevation. And then two, it's economically interesting to do it, and it's prefabricated so we can go fast. So in that case, we arrived by ourselves. So it's a parking. I don't know if you have that in Bruxelles, but after the 9:30, there was a types in Paris that Citroën and Peugeot start to build, which is composed by a ramp that brought the cars in each floor until the moment where you are on the roof. So there are like 150 on selling now, transforming it. It's really like the cars is leaving the center of the city, and this typology, which is extremely flexible, it's the new place for experience. So as a studio, we bought one of that, and literally we destroyed the roof, and we added these two floors. So to do that, that's very easy. And the section is like that, so we still have the structure of the old parking and everything, it's in wood. The studio, it's an open space divided by team. The entire studio is made with Okume plywood panels that are used to store, are used to become a bench, are used to become a wall, etc., etc. And also the ceiling of the upper floor, which is literally like a Mediterranean courtyard with a patio, with the space that surrounds this patio. And then the roof, which is a garden and a deck. That's the office. And the structure is extremely easy. So the center is in concrete that we cast on site because it's the part that is exposed with the rain and snow and everything, and even the facade. And then all the rest, it's in wood. So we started covering the ramp that brought the car on the roof to protect that from the rain, which allow us to destroy it. And then we start the peristelium, which is here, in concrete, which then allow us to put all the wooden structure that become the two floor. We cover it with a waterproof membrane, and we finished with a plywood ceiling. So details is very, very easy. That part, it's in concrete. Then you have the two sliding doors. And then you have this wooden part, which stays on the wall, which is here. So that's the studio from the sky. And it's really like a Lego, no? You just have that part, and the rest is composed and assembled. This is my own desk. And then when we ended the construction, we had a lot of panels, so we start to design those tables that we use a bit everywhere, which allow us to the next project to understand the logic that we used for the next project I will show you. Even these. So this is the fourth floor with this wall in wood, this storage, the different team. And then even the library. Everything comes from this. We bought a lot of materials, and then at the end we decided what to do with all of these. Even the stairs. It's the same, it's Kailash, which is KLH, which is the same wood that we use for a part of the slabs. The kitchen, this is the mother room. The materials room. And that brought us to the last project, which is a very small scale project, but that starts from a very big one. It's a series of furniture which is called Make A. but it's for the theater of Mayon. It's a theater that we just finished in Strasbourg. It's a very nice story of architecture. It's a theater that was born in the 70s, in the moment where French Minister of Culture started a program which was called Maison de la Culture, House of Culture, which were theaters that were installed in the peripheric part of the cities to bring culture in a complex district and to bring culture to the young people. And Mayon was one of that. Then they moved in the Parc des Expositions, in this fair. And what is nice is the fact that the fair was not really a theater. And they have to build up their own room, their own theater, and then they have to dismantle it every summer to do the fair, and then to rebuild the theater in September. That give to us, to them, a very precise culture of theater, which was, and the funny part is that was all around Europe going on with the idea of erase the limit between public and artist, erase the limit between city and theater, erase the limit between theater and contemporary art and performance, erase the limit between theater and circus. So they start to build their own culture of what they could do in a space that was totally flexible, and they become one of the most important scenes in Europe. People like, so that was their audience, you know, every year they use the exterior. People like Romeo Castellucci, they were resident there for 5 years. And so they've been part of this network that was going on in Europe, and at a certain point, the city decided to destroy that building. And we were invited for the competition. When I arrived there, I understand two things. The first one was that they really loved their own building. They don't want a new theater, they wanted. And the second one, they asked for, can you please build something for the contemporary theater, something which is not related to the proscenium theater. The proscenium theater, or also called Italian theater, is a theater where you enter, then you have the room, and then like here in the back, you have all the techniques, the loge, and everything. So the proscenium is really the limit between reality and illusion, is the limit between artist and public, is the limit that make everything. And it's the most used figure in building a theater is this one. So they asked for something which has no limit, where things could change every time. And we decide to show up in the competition with a plan of city saying, you know what, we will build a city. So we will just decide where are the streets, and then we will let you build up your own theater every time you want. And so we will give you wall that you can move and plan that can change, with the simple idea that there was one facade, so there was not front, not back, not side, not east, not west, one facade where you can enter everywhere. So in function of how is composed the theater, you choose your entrance. And then this facade turns around, one high, which is the same, with this kind of grill everywhere. So we try to build up a void more than something to be understood and used. The idea is to build the place of potential. So what has more potential than void? For us at the time, it was really the strategy. So those are different documents which shows the different scenarios. Even the track parking is composed as an auditorium. So there is a line and a scene. The exterior courtyard is protected by wind, and you can really approach that as a closed space. And so a few images of what could be the big room, the small room that connect directly to the bar to become one big room. And all the seats, they can move, and they can go even outside. And that's the building now. This is the exterior courtyard, which is very nice because it's open since 1 month, and you also become the place for 2 artistic projects. This is the bar with this 15-meter high wall that open totally. They can slide it, they can open, they are acoustic, they are reflective and absorbing wall in function of how you put it. Even the bar, it's a double side, or you open here or you open in the other side. And even the sign are screen everywhere, so you just have to change with your iPad what is going on in function of how the theater move. So this is the room. Even the acoustic can move. As you can see here, those are with chairs, without chairs. This is the 2 street. And the facade is suspended here, and it open and it slides in the wall. So exterior and interiors are totally connected. The repetition room, the artist room. And so when it was the moment to choose the furniture, we decided with them to follow the same logic of the entire project. So we said, you know what, when you buy a chair today, you pay half of the price is probably the branding, the advertising, the fact that the chairs has been constructed in China and it has to move in Europe. So you never know really what you get in terms of production. And we say to ourselves, why we don't use the CNC techniques, the wood, which is a very common and nice materials, which can be protected by, how do you call that, a linoleum, and which you can cut. And then the fact that you do that by yourself. You know how to, you know how to do spectacle, so I'm sure that you know how to combine together and do a chair. And so we shows up with different history to find a form, a type, and from there we select 8 kind of archaic type of sitting that generate family of object, which ends in this large composition where they have built everywhere by themselves. But the point is that we give to them, so the project is called make a chair, make a bench, make a table, make whatever. We gave to them a file, and then we give to them a list of places where they can cut the wood. We gave to them the list of places that where can buy the wood. And then we give to them the file to cut in function of the combination. If you want to do a chair and a table, so a chair to use the maximum of this wood. And then we give to them instruction to how to build, what you have to buy, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end, we end up with the chairs, you know, step by step, really like staying in IKEA world. And then we end up with that, which, believe me, is extremely nice. A chairs is done with only 100 euro. So try to buy a chair of 100 euro. And so it's like 4 pieces that you have to combine. These 1, 2, 3, 4, and then le contreventement, that I don't know how you say it in English. It's an okume plywood, like the same one that we have in the office, and the same materials which is already protected by this linoleum. Then it became a bench with another declination, then a stool, a rocking chair, different color. You know, the rocking chair, it cost 300 euro. Sofa, 3 places. Tables, different kind of colors, sides, details, form. It's in situ. And that's in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Umberto. Yeah, I can see what you meant by not seeing anything. Okay, I think we will just go ahead. Thank you for inviting us. And Martin and I also did what Umberto did and read a little bit about the theme of this evening. And we will go straight forward with wooden constructions and some views on how we relate to this material. The starting point for us could be to say that in a way, if you're from Sweden, the presence of the forest and the local context and the resources makes wood a very natural material. So in a way, you could say it's a material that we don't think about so much because it's always there. And if you want to start building a house, it's especially with a smaller project, it's often wood that would be the simplest and most straightforward solution. That said, we always take an interest in, regardless of which material we work with, to explore the specifics of that material and how architecture can be inspired and perhaps both limited but also have opportunities with the use of that material.
And as Umberto said, wood is just one of those materials that we can use. And we will try to describe why we use wood in certain kind of projects. And as Bolle said, Sweden has a lot of forests. We just realized that we have the same amount of population, Belgium and Sweden, but Sweden is 15 times as large as Belgium, and it's more or less just one big forest. So we have plenty of trees to use. And this image is an image that we often show when we talk about context, and context is about making sense in our way of interpreting it. It's built upon a site where it's just dry and a good spot on the parcel. The material is, of course, wood, because you have the natural resources just behind the actual building. So it's all about making sense, and the way it's assembled, the tectonics about the building is about what wood can offer, and also what like two men can carry, the length of the log. The way you assemble it, it's also as efficient as possible. So architecture is pretty much about pragmatism and local know-how, and try to understand the local context and what it has to offer.
Yeah, and you could also say that once you've defined the purpose of a project and the purpose of a building, that is of course something that we as architects has to comply with and deliver. And at the same time, that's not to say that we're finished. And I think even with this simple building that has been standing here now for 400 years or so, you can also sort of imagine the joy of the people that built this building and the care they took to detail the details. And I think that's the inspiration we find in this kind of local history that we have. And as a result, of course, you get the smell of the wood, you have the material quality and the texture, and of course, as a bonus, you can also actually take down and reuse these buildings. And just to come back to the size of Sweden, you could also say that I think different from Belgium, since we have a very long country, there are parts in the north where the forest and the wood is the obvious choice. At the same time, in the very south, as you might know, there is the work of Leverance and others that explore the brick as a bit in the northern Germany or in this part of the world or in Denmark. And you could also point at other circumstances like the Swedish king that in the 17th century forced the population on the island of Gotland to build their houses out of stone rather than using the oak trees because the king wanted them for his ships. So there are many different ways of sort of exploring and or sort of guiding architecture into a specific material. But tonight we're in the timber, and we're going to show you a few examples of our work in that sense.
Yeah, we have picked a couple of projects of ours that most of them are on the drawing board, and I think we will finish off with a built project. But the other ones are on the drawing board, so to say. This one is not complete yet. We're still working on it, but we have a sort of strong idea, which is based upon using trusses in wood. The site is out in the archipelago, a beautiful setting, close to the water, and the nature itself is the quality. And our basic idea, since the site is quite steep, is to do as neat touchdown on the ground as possible, and not to interfere with the ground. So it's just a small plinth that lands on the rock, and then we have this sort of system of trusses that surrounds it and create this sort of cantilevering structure. So it's not really about an idea about space. It's the starting point was an idea about a structural way of working with wood on a plinth.
Yeah, and a bit like the red house, the size of each piece of wood is of course limited, and as a total system, this house becomes a world within itself in a way. And you can imagine moving through the different parts. The house proper is actually an angle to the left in this image, and then there's an open space to the right, and that is also located towards the sun and the best views. So you can also imagine that if you're in the bedroom, for instance, you will have a slightly more filtered relation to the outside, and whereas you move inside the house, you can choose, as in a forest, how close you get to the views and the sun, etc.
You can also refer the space to climbing the Eiffel Tower, or just inside a structure, a construction, or inside a steel bridge or something like that. We have the sort of construction as efficient as possible, being the spatial element.
And of course, it wants to express its lightness in relation to the site, as Martin said. The archipelago is a place where we have worked a lot, and many of the first projects were there. This next house, though, is on the Baltic island of Gotland, and it is planned for. It's actually under construction right now, and it's planned for a family that, with quite small resources, wanted to create a space for themselves, a vacation home that they could use during the summer. And the site was quite big, with a very large open space towards the south. It's farmland, more or less. We realized that the construction had to be very quick and simple, so we looked into the possibilities of CLT wood, so that the house would be assembled with as few parts as possible.
For you who don't know, but CLT is the cross-laminated timber, and you can use wood in many different ways as cladding or structural systems, and CLT is the solid wood construction principle, and this house is built upon that. And it's an idea about merging the indoor and outdoor as much as possible. Since it's a summer house, the client won't live as much outside as well as inside, and it's based upon one huge pitched roof. See if this one works. Yeah, and underneath that pitched roof is 3 volumes. The function doesn't really matter. It could be a kitchen, it could be a living room, a sleeping area. It's just a generic space under this roof. It also creates this sort of spaces in between that are outdoor spaces.
And the dimensions of the house is calculated according to the limits of these CLT units. And as you can see, it's a very large cantilever, about 4 meters and 2 meters to the sides. And that, of course, is sort of the main character of the space. And the relation between indoor and outdoor, as Martin mentioned, is probably 1 to 2 or something. I think total space covered by this roof is about 300 square meters, whereas the roof house proper is in fact only about 100. And this creates this sequence of both high and covered spaces and indoor, more intimate spaces.
The CLT material is kind of nice to work with. It's like the same principle as you do cardboard models. It's just a solid material that you use, and it has the sort of potential of enhance the abstraction of the building. So the whole building can be closed. All the windows has shutters, so when you leave the house, it's just monolith without any openings. Total abstraction. So, and this is also the entrance. You enter from the north, and you can see how the light goes through the openings, and you slowly open up the building when you enter. And we, as Bolle said, calculated quite a lot on how much we could cantilever the roof. The maximum length of the cantilevering is 4 meters without any support, and the CLT slab is 25 centimeters. And the heaviest thing is, of course, the snow weight that we have to take into account in Sweden.
And those figures were meant about 26 millimeters of a sitting, if you have maximum load on top of it. And the size, the largest size is 14 meters long. So the whole roof will consist out of 6 units. And then you can imagine more or less 1 unit for each wall in the house. The construction is uninsulated when it comes to the facade walls, whereas the ceiling is insulated, so that the house can be used not only in the summer but also in the winter.
So the production of the house is more or less done in not on site, so to say. So, and the mounting is done very quickly. It's just a couple of few pieces that you assemble and you have it more or less ready. Only the exterior is clad. The interior is just the exposed CLT.
Yeah, we didn't mention that in our introduction, but when we started out, Martin and I, we did a lot of smaller projects, kitchen conversions and private houses, and we still do that actually. We keep that, whereas of course today most of our staff, we're 25 architects in the office today, and we work on public buildings. I would say that is probably 80% of what we do, schools and museums, etc., and some planning.
Next one is a project we did 6 years ago. Time flies, and it was also one of those projects that wanted to sort of propeller the idea of using solid wood. So we were approached by a company called Folkhem, a Swedish company that has decided to build all their buildings in CLT wood, which is kind of interesting. And they invited us to do a project in the border of the center of Stockholm, former industrial area close to the water, and they wanted us to look upon the possibility of build 20 stories or do quite a lot in a very dense area. It's a beautiful spot close to the water, facing north. So we and the whole idea is to sort of extend the perimeter block carrier system, that's sort of the traditional European city with closed courtyards. But we felt, is there a possibility to break the rules, so to say, and introduce another topology into this? Can that make sense? And we started out to look upon this north-facing position but one of the most beautiful ones, where the water view is, of course, the main quality. Instead of just having one of those 6-story blocks facing the water, with just a few tenants being able to see it, we felt maybe we can narrow the block slightly, introduce a new road, but still keeping the road where we have a base that defines the street, adding the towers, which opens up for the neighbors behind to look out. Slightly turn the vertical buildings so they don't look into each other and open up as much as possible. And all in all, it creates this sort of new topology that sort of makes sense within the city grid.
And this is it's a speculative project on one part, but that is part of an ongoing development in Stockholm. So we're still waiting for the client to be assigned a specific site for the project. And these plans are just to show the simple structure. There's a core that is part of the stabilizing and load-bearing system in the middle with the double elevators. And then that each floor could contain either one 100 square meter apartment or be subdivided, of course, to smaller apartments. And then in both ends of each buildings, there's an open loggia, kind of huge balcony. As an urban setting, it adds a few qualities to the site. As mentioned, it's on the tip sort of the city, and there's strong wind sometimes, and it's also facing northeast. So we thought this inner side that could be developed with these angular volumes would in fact produce south-facing and wind-protected qualities at street level, whereas the housing units also get a different relation to each other. And again, I mean, the quality of solid timber in a house like this is, of course, that you have a completely different relation to that material than had it been built in metal or concrete. And during the process, we also learned that the forest, the Swedish forest alone, grows at a speed that produces the timber needed for this project in 5 minutes. So that's quite interesting. You could produce a building or a project like this each 5 minutes if you were a quick builder.
And having that said, it's also interesting to think about is the use of wood a local resource? Perhaps not for everybody. For us it is, but if you go the further south you go, the more dense the population is, and less forests you find, and you have to transport the wood needed for the houses in the south of Europe, for instance. And it's all about using wood. I think is all about saving the planet somehow. We find it as a sustainable material, and if we add a lot of transport to that, it might be not as good as good anymore. So I think the overall lifetime analysis of a building is kind of complex and but also important to do.
Right. Another ongoing project is the housing project just on the outskirts of Gothenburg, where we were invited to look at this plot within a completely new development. All of this in this model is new, and we didn't do that, but it's in a rather nice location, and you can see there's a lake up there. And when we were invited to look at it, it was thought of as a series of row houses or semi-detached housing units. And just to understand the scale, the buildings, well, at the outer limit of the planning are, well, 40 meters high or so. So there's like a huge change in scale towards the center, where you only have 2 or 3 stories, and then really large apartment buildings towards the outside. We started looking at that, and we've been thinking before also in Stockholm on a site about the relation between the possibility of having a house of your own and the alternative of sharing a house or sharing a garden or even living in a flat. And we thought it could be quite interesting if we could have a efficiency as high as a row house or a semi-detached house, but still produce freestanding units, so that each house and each unit has its own space and own garden.
So what we're saying is that the row house is sort of a compromise between the willing of living in a private house, but cannot really afford it, so it's pretty much close to living in a flat, but very close to your neighbors. So we developed this idea of doing a vertical village, where we have the same amount of massing, but we, instead of having them in 2 stories, we have them in 3 or 4 stories, and creating these super small parcels, but big enough to have a small outdoor space for living. Together with that, we introduced hedges to divide and create a visual barrier between the different parcels, and also sort of integrate and merge architecture and landscape architecture and nature into one idea that sort of rely on each other.
The size of these units are only 7 meters by 7 meters, and the highest is 12 meters. When we looked at it, it could in fact be built a bit like the summer house we showed before, with 1 unit, 1 piece per facade, or maximum 2. So you can imagine a bit like a house of cards, that you arrive on the site and then you just mount it very quickly, the complete outer shell, including the floors, and then you very quickly also have a covered roof, which is crucial, as many of you know already, for the construction process, and then you can keep on building on the inside without being disturbed by the climate. So this way, it also proved to be a very cost-efficient project, and this is something we hope to go on site next year. It's currently under planning together with the municipality.
And as you can see, there are no cars. The whole area is planned without cars. You have a garage outside, but it should be car-free. So it opened up for the possibility to have those small alleys, totally green and nice. And there's also, all the volumes are the same, but you have a slight possibility to adjust the windows or turn them around, so you can sort of squeeze them in. And in the inside is also a possibility to add a 4th level, or so you can either have a bedroom up here or a roof terrace or something like that.
Okay, so the final project we wanted to show you is a house that was completed a few years ago already, but it sort of connects back to where we are in the world. This is an aerial photo of Stockholm. You can sort of get an idea of where the city is in the middle, and then the more than 50,000 islands that consist the Stockholm archipelago. And in this case, a rather small island, so the only way you can go there is basically by your own boat. And it sort of made us come back to the start. When you build your house, what is it you're looking for? And this is, in a way, a response to the easiest, the sort of least possible effort to go on a site, and that's of course the space of a tent. That inspired this building. It's a 1-room space, you could say.
And the outskirts of the archipelago is mainly for recreation. You go during the summer. during the winter it's almost impossible to go here because you have ice and it's super cold and windy. But during the summer it opens up and it's a beautiful setting. And the tent is something that's sort of apparent. A lot of people go here hiking, kayaking and so forth.
So the biggest space is of course this one with the relation to the ocean, and this is actually, well, as you saw in the image before, it's right at the end, at the edge of the archipelago. So outside of those islands that you see, it's just the open sea, and then you get to Finland or the Baltic countries. And then each space has, in fact, the same kind of roof or ceiling that is mirrored so that they become stable within this oddly shaped roof.
And this project is not built upon CLT. It's not a solid timber structure. It's a framework of wood, which is clad and insulated. And the bent roof is made upon glue lamp beams that are prefabricated. So it's a lightweight construction, so to say, due to the problems with having all the building material transported to the site.
Great. I think that was the last image. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Umberto, Bolle, and Tam, for this interesting lectures. Very different projects we have seen. And now I would like to invite you next to me to discuss this use of wood, of which we have seen now completely different examples. And my first question would be, Umberto, one of the first projects you showed us was the project of the tower, the wood-up tower in Paris, where you were quite critical for the choice of the material of wood imposed by the client for this typology in Paris, for economical and structural reasons. And you are building 4 towers, not even 1. So I was wondering, how would you react on this? How would you see the use of wood for high buildings? Is it this competition, this outbidding that is going on between different cities and countries just to be the first to build the highest tower in wood?
Well, I think the reason behind why we see a lot of proposals of high rises with the wooden construction is that it's not a new material, but it's new when it comes to an urban setting, and since we have had concrete and steel for quite some time, and we see a lot of potential with the wood, and for us in Sweden we have it as a natural resource. It sort of makes sense to try out what's the possibilities within that material, and to stretch the limits is always a way of sort of develop new techniques of using stuff. At first, you find it kind of awkward, but after a while, you come up with new solutions. And as what we can see now, since there are several housing units in Sweden and especially Stockholm that's been built in CLT, it's getting more and more efficient, affordable, and also, when you listen to the tenants living there, they find a lot of living qualities within those houses. So the material itself has a lot of potentials.
But then again, I think wood is often connected with the fact that people want to build more friendly to the environment, more ecological. But still I was thinking building new buildings instead of reusing existing buildings is maybe not the solution. And I had the impression that maybe using wood for new towers is just continuing the logic of the way we are building cities. We are building new towers. but we just change the material, which is maybe more ecological. But then I was thinking of your office that you made, Umberto, where you took an existing building and you just put 2 layers on top in wood, where you reuse an existing building and you use material which makes sense because of the lightness of the material. Do you think that this is maybe also an answer to the questions that we are asking us today concerning environmental issues?
I think the question of the wood is every time is related to the situation, to the context. Obviously in Sweden it's totally like logic that whatever is the building you try to do that in wood. As you say, it is a big forest and then you already have these techniques, etc., etc. In France still, and even in Belgium, it's still a bit complex as a situation because after the war, when I say we, I say France, we have built 14 million housing in 14 years. You know, the name of your phone, it's the same one than the guys that make concrete. So there is an entire industry which is made it on the knowledge of 1 or 2 techniques, and now we are trying to change it. So you face an enemy which is impossible to reach with. I mean, the concrete costs nothing. The concrete has, I mean, structurally, it's a bit more flexible than the wood. The concrete, it's local. You take the sand where you are. Even the wood in France is not. I mean, for the wood up, we have to bring the wood from the north through the river, and then control and check all the passage. So still very complex, but obviously when you go in a national project, which is an economical, well, all the example is, I mean, for the elevation, obviously it's the right one, but it's something that has already been done. Even the 19th century city, the last part of the building was in wood, even if the building was in stone. So it's kind of very logic. When you go in new construction, for the moment, as I said in the lecture, there are proof that we can do it, and doing one after the other, probably we can a bit change the economic logic and find some positive point, but still very complex, if I have to be sincere. And even after this accident of Notre Dame, it's a nightmare. I mean, I mean, people get totally scared about the connection between wood and fire, and so the rules are very changed. I'm sure that in Sweden it's very. I've seen your building and you can expose the wood, even if it's structurally. We cannot do that in France. I imagine that you don't have. I mean, like very, very constrained that challenge the idea of using wood just because the rules are extreme.
Is it true that the fact that wood is part of the tradition of building in Sweden makes it much more evident and easy, also technically, and in regard to legislation, to use it?
I think that we've been on it for quite some time. So if we go back 8 years or so, I think the highest building, all made in wood in Sweden, was 8 or 9 stories high. And since then it's been developed. But yeah, so for your question also, what Umberto said, the fact is that if you use solid timber, it actually withstands fire quite well. And you know, if you compare it to steel, for instance, that starts losing its capacity at 500 degrees or so, I mean, in best of cases, the wood actually just burn on the top layer, and then it still stands. So it's a bit of a calculation. You have to just be prepared for that and use actually probably more timber than what is needed just for the construction, so that you can allow it also to be affected by a fire for some time. I think it all comes back to, I mean, also connecting to what you said about the use of existing buildings and the reuse of buildings. It's making sense. That is very much the role of the architect today.
And if you can find the most straightforward solution and with a long lifespan, whether that is the reuse of an existing building and the refurbishment of that building, which is sometimes actually more costly and more energy consuming than a new build, then that is fine. And I think if we look at Stockholm and many of the other towns in Sweden, I think that what's happening right now is that when we have a big lack of housing, right? So we need housing. One part is building new housing, but one part is definitely converting old buildings, whether it's industrial buildings or former office buildings or whatever it is, into housing. So it all happens at the same time.
I also think if you look upon the history of wooden architecture from a Swedish perspective is that it has been through many different changes. Initially it was the sort of easiest resource and most natural way of material to choose. But when the urbanization grew, we started to build wooden cities, like 2-3 stories high. Quite a few of them caught fire, and we realized that the problem with that was to start to build in stone instead, and the urbanization continued. And the wooden architecture were more rural material, and maybe looked upon as a poor material. But since new techniques has arrived, and as Paula said, the CLT has a quite good fire resistance. The regulation changes, and now it has become an urban material again, which is kind of interesting. But we are still on the verge of that development. So we'll see if it's a material that's for the future or not.
You say we'll see. So, in your opinion, what should happen? How should it? What should be the evolution of the use of wood?
I think, as we said in the beginning, architecture is has quite a lot to do with to make sense, and especially when it comes to economy, we have to follow that, and the whole industry follows that. So whether we can wish for quite a lot, but if it's not, if you cannot defend it economical wise, or if we don't have regulations that sort of forces us to use a certain material, it might not be used or might be used. It's a lot of forces that it's not really up to us as architects to decide if we want to use one or the other. It's about economy and regulations, I think.
Yeah, certainly. But then again, if I think again of the wood tower that you were a bit imposed to make in wood, it's also a way to promote a certain material, because there's a conviction behind it that it's a good material to be introduced in, for example, a city that is mainly made of natural stone. So I would like to ask you, working on this project now, does it change the way that you think about this material? Is it a project that also has quite an influence on other projects that you will be making in the future?
When we did the competition at the beginning, we were attracted by the idea of, which is natural in architecture, to push one materials in its limit and to see what could happen. So it was clearly an academic exercise where we decided to be part of this project, to say, okay, let's learn first of all, and let's see what we can do and how we can think. So there are many positive things that we have learned from that project, and there are others which still very bizarre. The experience in itself brought me in this conviction at the end that if we are speaking about wood today, it's because of its CO2 print, it's because it's local as a material, it's because it's there is an economy to build around that. is because what we're trying to do in Wood Up is that we use all the recycled part to do the furniture for the housing like we did in the theater. There is a nice story that can be built around that. But then there is another level of question, which is another time who you address the project. You know, when I see Paris and I see the complexity of the city and I see how much do we need housing, how complex is to engage with this extreme density and with this social complexity, especially in that part of Paris where we still have something to recreate in terms of different parts of the society that have to learn to live together. That sounds that, you know, the materials you choose is the last of my problem, to be sincere. And then if you do that in another level, it's very interesting. It's extremely coherent with the contemporary world. But still, my question is where, when, and for how long you build. And this idea of, you know, the real things I'm understanding with the fact that I'm aging, doing the Grand Palais, for example, it's a large expense because you know that whatever line you draw, it will stay there for a century. And so this idea of the relationship between what you do and the time change all the perspective. So is the wood one of the materials that can allow to solve this equation in a long distance term? I don't know. We can ask to ourselves. But what I promote as an architect is the idea that we don't have to have dogma. There are no rules, and each situation has to be challenged, and each situation has its own specificity. So I don't know if, I really don't wish that the wood take over everything. I still going for this diversity, especially in climate, which are moderated, like that part of Europe, and that every time we challenge different conditions to find the really right way that solve the entire equation. So honestly, I don't have any strong position of doing or not. I really consider that in the point of view of the project in itself.
Yeah. So just to return a bit the question that Umberto now was asking as well to you, how do you face this question of material in your work?
I think we mentioned that in fact we try to start from a blank slate with an open mind. So if timber seems to be the best material or the best choice, then we'll go for that. Another view on that is, of course, that a building that stands for a very long time, whether it's 100 years or 2 or 3 or 400 years, like the red cottage we showed, or the storage building, then of course in the end it becomes super sustainable because it's still in use. So the oldest building still in use is probably the most sustainable building, whether you build it out of stone or timber. Yeah, so I think we, again, it's very easy to sort of have a positive feeling about timber and because it's natural material, you can reuse it, etc., etc. We all know that, and it's CO efficient compared to, in principle, every other material. So, I mean, if you can use it, it's probably a good choice, but then it has to be, of course, well, you shouldn't have a cost at the end, so to speak. As a matter of fact, I mean, we will try you out a bit because we just won a competition in Paris this Friday, and it is going to be a timber building. So, a timber building. But it's not a high-rise though. But it's a mixed-use building with both art spaces and housing, etc. So, and together also with the local team here from N51. Yeah, we look forward to that. So we will have to come back in a few years and tell you whether it works or not.
But if it's not an high-rise, it's okay. The problem in Paris, it's really literally when you pass, we call that family. So when you pass the third family, it becomes a nightmare. And so there is no logic that, I mean, it's something that's really common and in the culture, the fact that you do 5-6 floors in wood, and it has already been done before. It's the question of the high rise for the moment. It's really like a medieval culture. No, I have to show that I can do it, and then it stands and it's very high. For me, still in this very strange territory where someone has decided to have this iconic building, and the strange part that I am doing it.
Okay, I think we quite agree about choosing the right material for the right building on the right spot and with the right height. I think that might be a good conclusion for this nice conversation and for this interesting evening, I hope, for you as well. So I would like to thank you again for being here and for being so generous with all the projects that you showed. And I would also like to thank you for being with us. Thank you very much.